The night I walked away from my father's boardroom, I carried nothing but my daughter's hand and a promise I swore I'd keep. 24 hours later, I was sitting in a dented sedan outside a convenience store, watching my bank account drop to $17 and wondering if pride was really worth freezing to death. My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 36 years old, and the story of how I went from tech CEO to homeless mother to inheriting a fortune I never asked for begins with a single moment. The moment I chose integrity over survival, and it cost me everything. But before I tell you how I lost it all, you need to understand what I built. 5 years ago, I founded Next Trust Solutions, a cybersecurity firm that promised one thing nobody else in Silicon Valley would: complete transparency, no backdoors for governments, no selling user data to the highest bidder, no exceptions. We were the company that said no to the big money, the dirty deals, the moral compromises that everyone else called just business. I was featured in Tech Innovator magazine. They called me the last honest woman in tech. I had a corner office in downtown Seattle with windows that overlooked Puget Sound. I had a team of 30 brilliant engineers who believed in what we were building. I had investors who claimed they shared my vision. I had a husband, Marcus, who loved the lifestyle more than he loved the principle. And I had my daughter, Sophie, 7 years old, dark braids, eyes that saw everything, who would sit in my office after school doing homework while I debugged code and believed her mother could do anything. I thought I had built something unshakable. I was wrong. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The unraveling started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in our weekly strategy meeting when my assistant knocked on the glass door, her face pale. There was a process server in the lobby. He handed me a manila envelope thick enough to stop a bullet. Inside was a lawsuit. Titan Guard Systems, our biggest competitor, was suing Next Trust for corporate espionage and theft of proprietary encryption technology. The amount they were seeking was more than our entire company valuation. It was designed to destroy us. I actually laughed when I first read it. Marcus was next to me in that conference room, and I turned to him with the papers in my hand and said, "This is insane. We've never stolen anything. Our entire brand is built on being the opposite of these people." But Marcus didn't laugh. He was reading the complaint summary, and his face had gone white. "Victoria, these emails they're quoting, they look like they came from your server." I snatched the papers back. There, printed in clean black ink, were excerpts from emails I had never written, messages about acquiring competitor technology through industrial espionage, wire transfer authorizations to shell companies, digital signatures that matched mine perfectly but documented actions I had never taken. Someone had framed us. More specifically, someone had framed me. The media response was instantaneous and brutal. By noon, the headlines were everywhere. Transparency Queen exposed as corporate thief. Next Trust CEO's house of cards collapses. My face, the same professional headshot from that magazine cover, was now used to illustrate articles about fraud, deception, and the fall of a Silicon Valley hypocrite. My phone started ringing. Investors first, then board members, then clients. Everyone wanted the same thing: distance. They wanted to make sure the world knew they weren't associated with me, with this scandal, with the stain that was spreading across everything I'd built. The emergency board meeting happened 3 days later. I walked in prepared to fight, to show them the forensic analysis my lawyer had ordered to prove this was a setup. But the room's energy told me I'd already lost. They'd made their decision before I arrived. The fabricated evidence was too perfect, the timing too calculated. Titan Guard's lawyers had done their homework. Every fake email, every falsified transaction log had my digital fingerprint. And proving that fingerprints can be forged, that experts can fake anything given enough time and money, that takes months or years of litigation that we simply couldn't afford. My legal team told me the truth in a cold conference room that smelled of burnt coffee and defeat. Fighting this would bankrupt the company before we ever got to trial. Our only option was settlement, but we didn't have the capital to settle. We were done. Within 2 weeks, Next Trust Solutions was finished. Our bank accounts were frozen by court order, pending resolution. Our office lease was terminated. My engineers, the brilliant people who'd believed in my vision, started leaving in waves. They had families, mortgages, reputations to protect. I couldn't blame them. I would have done the same. The personal implosion was quieter, but infinitely more painful. Marcus changed. The man who'd held my hand at our courthouse wedding 10 years ago, who'd promised to build a life with me, started looking at me like I was a stranger he regretted meeting. The fight started small. Why had I been so rigid about ethics? Why had I turned down that lucrative government contract last year? Why had I made enemies by being so publicly self-righteous? "You brought this on us, Victoria," he said one night after Sophie was asleep. We were standing in our kitchen, the same beautiful modern space where we used to cook together on weekends. He was on his 3rd glass of whiskey. "You were so busy being perfect that you couldn't see you were painting a target on your back. You were arrogant, and now look at us." He filed for legal separation the following week. He moved in with his brother across town. The house, our beautiful home with the garden where Sophie learned to plant tomatoes, went into foreclosure when the bank froze my assets. Everything I owned became evidence in a case I couldn't afford to fight. I packed what I could fit in our old Honda Civic, the sensible car Marcus had always hated, and I tried to figure out what came next, my parents. I hadn't wanted to ask them. Jonathan and Patricia Hayes weren't just wealthy, they were old Seattle money, the kind of people who sat on museum boards and had buildings named after them. They disapproved of my tech career from the start. They'd wanted me to join the family investment firm, to play it safe, to be respectable. But Sophie needed a roof. Sophie needed food. So I swallowed my pride and I drove to their estate in Laurelhurst, that fortress of brick and ivy overlooking Lake Washington. My mother answered the door herself. She was dressed for a charity luncheon, pearls and a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire legal defense. She didn't hug me. She didn't invite me in. She just stood there in the doorway and waited for me to speak. "Mom, I need help," I said. The words tasted like poison. "The house is gone. Marcus is gone. Everything's frozen. I just need a loan to get an apartment and hire a lawyer to appeal. Just temporary." She looked past me to where Sophie sat in the car, clutching her stuffed elephant. My mother's face didn't change. She'd perfected that expression decades ago, the one that revealed nothing. "Victoria, your father and I have discussed this situation extensively," she said, her voice as cool as lake water in winter. "We can't be associated with this scandal Hayes Investments has a reputation to protect. Our clients, our partners, they're all watching this spectacle. We simply cannot risk the exposure." "I'm your daughter," I said, and I hated that my voice broke. "Sophie is your granddaughter." "You made your choices," my mother replied. You chose to build that company your way, to refuse our advice, to publicly position yourself as somehow morally superior to everyone else in your industry. Well, this is the consequence of that choice. You're an adult. You need to handle it." She stepped back and started to close the door. I put my hand out to stop it. "Please," I whispered. "Just enough for first and last month's rent. I'll pay you back." My mother opened her purse and pulled out her wallet. She counted out $500 bills and held them out. I stared at them, understanding what they represented. The exact price my mother was willing to pay to make me go away. "This is all we can offer," she said. "Please don't contact us again until this matter is resolved. We love you, Victoria, but we simply cannot have our names attached to this mess." I took the money because Sophie was in the car and Sophie needed dinner. I took the money and I hated myself for it. As I walked back to the car, Sophie waved at my mother through the window. "Bye, Grandma," she called out, her child's voice bright and innocent. My mother didn't wave back. She was already closing the door. The $500 bought us a week at the Emerald Motel, a long strip of rooms painted institutional green on the outskirts of the city near the airport. The carpet was stained, the shower had rust around the drain, but the door locked and it was warm. For Sophie, I made it an adventure. We were secret agents on an undercover mission. The tiny soap bars were treasure. The traffic noise outside was the sound of the ocean. She believed me because she was 7 and because she trusted me completely. That trust felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Marcus came by once to drop off divorce papers. He didn't come into the room. He didn't ask to see Sophie. He handed me the envelope through a crack in the door like I might be contagious. "Just sign them," he said. "It's no fault. Clean break. You keep the car." The papers outlined shared custody, but I could read between the lines. Marcus didn't want custody. He wanted freedom from the scandal, from me, from the responsibility. By claiming shared custody in the paperwork, he could avoid significant child support while knowing I was in no position to fight him legally. I signed them sitting on the edge of the motel bed while Sophie watched cartoons. I used a pen that said Emerald Motel on the side. When I was done, I felt nothing. The marriage had died months ago. This was just paperwork. The money ran out exactly when the motel manager said it would. He wasn't cruel about it, just matter of fact. "Checkout's at 11, ma'am. You're paid through tonight. Tomorrow I'll need another week's rent or I'll have to ask you to vacate." I spent that entire day applying for jobs from the motel's weak Wi-Fi connection. At first, I applied for positions that matched my experience: Chief Technology Officer, VP of Engineering, Senior Security Architect. The responses, when they came, were identical. "We appreciate your interest, but we're moving forward with other candidates." Then I lowered my expectations. Project manager, senior developer, IT support, administrative assistant, anything. I got one phone interview, a small startup that needed a systems administrator. The interviewer sounded young and enthusiastic right up until the end of our conversation when he said, "Hey, I have to ask, are you the Victoria Hayes from that Next Trust situation?" My stomach dropped. "Yes, but the allegations are completely fabricated. I'm in the process of appealing—" Right, he interrupted, his tone already shifting to professional distance. "Look, I appreciate your time, but we're a small team, and we just can't take the risk of hiring someone involved in that kind of legal situation. I hope you understand. Best of luck." The line went dead. That's when I understood. My name was poison. Victoria Hayes, the woman who'd been on magazine covers, the CEO who'd built something meaningful, was now unemployable. I wasn't just broke. I was radioactive. That night was our last in the motel. The next morning, with nowhere else to go, I loaded everything we owned into the Honda. Sophie thought we were going on a new adventure. "Where are we going, Mama?" she asked, her face bright with trust. "Somewhere special," I told her, forcing brightness into my voice. "We're going to be urban explorers, like a treasure hunt." We spent that first night in a 24-hour supermarket parking lot. I folded down the back seats and made a nest of our blankets and pillows. Sophie curled up with her elephant, Mr. Floppy, and fell asleep almost immediately. Exhausted from what she thought was an exciting day, I sat in the driver's seat and watched other cars come and go. Normal people buying normal groceries, going home to normal houses. I wondered if any of them had ever fallen this far, this fast. Our days developed a rhythm. We woke with the sun, washed up in the supermarket bathroom, and drove to the Seattle Public Library downtown. The library was our sanctuary. It was warm, safe, had clean bathrooms and free Wi-Fi. Sophie loved the children's section. She'd spend hours at story time, drawing, playing educational games on the kids' computers while I sat in the adult section sending out resumes and trying to piece together what had happened to my company. I became obsessed with the Titan Guard lawsuit. Something about it felt familiar. The methodology, the surgical precision of the framing, the way the evidence had been planted so perfectly, I started researching similar cases, looking for patterns, trying to understand who would have both the motive and the sophisticated capability to destroy me so completely. Money was the constant terror. We lived on peanut butter sandwiches and day-old bread from the supermarket bakery. Sometimes I'd buy Sophie a banana or an apple, and she'd try to share it with me. "What about you, Mama?" she'd ask, holding out half her fruit. "Oh, I'm doing a special health cleanse," I'd say, smiling. "Just water for me. It's very good for energy." I was so hungry my hands shook. I was so tired I couldn't think straight. But I smiled. I always smiled for Sophie. The nights were hardest. After the library closed at 9, we'd return to whatever parking lot felt safest that night. Sometimes the supermarket, sometimes a closed office park, sometimes a corner of a hospital parking garage where we could blend in with the night shift workers' cars. Sophie would fall asleep quickly, warm and fed and safe as I could make her. I'd sit in the front seat with my laptop balanced on my knees. The screen's glow the only light, tethered to whatever weak Wi-Fi signal I could find. I wasn't just looking for work anymore. I was investigating. Because someone had done this to me deliberately, and I was going to find out who. One night in late April, everything fell apart completely. It was past midnight. We were parked behind a shuttered warehouse in an industrial area near the docks. The location wasn't ideal, but we'd been chased out of our usual spots by security guards and needed somewhere quiet where no one would question a car with fogged windows. Sophie had been coughing for 2 days. I'd told myself it was just allergies, just the cold, damp Seattle spring, just the confined space of the car. But that night, her coughing changed. It became deeper, wetter, desperate. I turned on the dome light and touched her forehead. She was burning up. Her skin wasn't just warm, it was scalding. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, and she was shivering so violently the whole car seemed to shake. "Mama, I'm cold," she whimpered, which made no sense because she was on fire. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here." My hands were shaking as I grabbed a water bottle and a clean shirt, soaking it to wipe her face. She moaned and turned away. "It hurts," she cried. I listened to her chest and heard a crackling sound like paper crinkling. Pneumonia. My daughter had pneumonia, and I'd been so focused on surviving I hadn't seen it getting worse. I threw myself into the driver's seat and started the engine. The car sputtered once before catching. The gas gauge was already below E, the orange warning light glowing like an accusation. But I didn't care. I drove through the dark streets toward the nearest hospital, Pacific Northwest Medical Center, my hazard lights flashing, my heart hammering prayers I didn't know I still remembered. The emergency room entrance was bright and sterile and busy. I pulled right up to the ambulance bay, left the car running, and ran around to get Sophie. She was barely conscious, her body limp and hot in my arms. I kicked through the automatic doors and stumbled toward the triage desk. "My daughter," I gasped. "She can't breathe. She has a fever. Please, she needs help." The nurse at the desk looked up from her computer with practiced exhaustion. "Fill out these forms," she said, sliding a clipboard toward me. "No, you don't understand. She's really sick. Her oxygen levels, her fever." The nurse looked, really looked, at Sophie's flushed face and labored breathing. Her demeanor shifted. "Get her to Bay 3, now!" Everything became chaos and clarity at once. A doctor appeared, pressing a stethoscope to Sophie's back. A second nurse wrapped a tiny blood pressure cuff around her arm. Machines beeped. Numbers appeared on monitors. The doctor's face was serious. "Temperature's 104.2. Oxygen saturation is 88. Mom, any history of respiratory illness?" "No, none. She was fine until 2 days ago. We've been staying in our car. It's cold and damp and—" "Pneumonia," the doctor said, cutting me off. His voice wasn't unkind, just urgent. "We need to start antibiotics immediately. Get an IV in her. She needs to be admitted. At least 3 days of monitoring and treatment." Relief crashed through me so powerfully I thought I might collapse. "Thank you," I sobbed. "Thank you so much. Let's get her stabilized," the doctor said to his team. He turned to me. "Mom, I need you to go to the admissions desk. They'll get her registered and we'll get her a room upstairs." I stumbled back to the main desk in a daze. A different woman sat there, this one in a blue business suit behind a glass partition. "Name?" she asked. "Sophie Hayes. She's being admitted for pneumonia." "Insurance card and identification, please." The words crashed into me like cold water insurance. I'd lost my company-provided insurance months ago. The Cobra continuation was $400 a month I hadn't been able to afford. "I don't have insurance right now," I said quietly, "but she needs treatment. There must be emergency provisions." The woman's expression didn't change. "I understand. For an uninsured multi-day admission, we'll need a deposit." She typed something, pulled a printed form from beside her computer, and slid it under the glass. The number at the bottom had 4 digits before the decimal point. More money than I'd seen in months. Money I would never have. "I don't have this," I whispered. "My accounts are frozen. There's a lawsuit. Please, isn't there a payment plan? Something?" She pulled out a second form. "You can apply for financial assistance, but that takes 3 to 5 business days to process. For immediate admission, but the doctor said she needs to be admitted now. She needs oxygen. She needs—" "Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but we're a private hospital. Without insurance or a deposit, we can provide emergency stabilization and a prescription for oral antibiotics, but we cannot admit her as an inpatient." I pulled out my debit card, the one linked to my nearly empty personal account. "Just run this. Maybe there's enough." She swiped it. The machine beeped, declined. "Try again," I begged. She swiped it again, slower this time, as if that would somehow change the result. Beep. declined. "I'm sorry," she said, sliding the card back. "If you'd like, I can have the doctor write prescriptions for fever reducers and antibiotics. You'll need to fill them at a pharmacy and monitor her at home." "Home?" I said, my voice rising. "We're living in a car. My daughter has pneumonia and you're sending her back to sleep in a car? Ma'am, if you raise your voice, I'll need to call security. I'm very sorry, but those are the hospital's policies regarding payment." I walked back to the treatment bay like a ghost. The kind nurse was disconnecting the oxygen sensor from Sophie's finger. Sophie whimpered. "What's happening?" I asked, though I already knew. "Sweetie, admissions said you're taking her home," the nurse said softly. There was real compassion in her eyes, which somehow made it worse. "The doctor's writing prescriptions for antibiotics and fever reducers. You'll need to keep her hydrated and watch her breathing. If she gets worse, bring her back." They were discharging her. They were sending a 7-year-old with pneumonia and an oxygen saturation of 88 back out into a storm, into a car. Because I couldn't pay, I picked Sophie up. Her small body was still burning, still shaking. I didn't take the prescriptions because I knew I didn't have the money to fill them anyway. I carried her back through those automatic doors and into the rain. The Honda was still there, hazard lights still flashing, engine still running. I put Sophie in the back seat, covered her with every blanket I had, and I sat in the driver's seat and finally, completely broke. I cried. Not the quiet tears I'd been swallowing for months, but violent, ugly sobs that tore from somewhere deep in my chest. I pounded the steering wheel with my fists. I screamed at the universe, at God, at whoever was supposed to be listening. "Please," I howled. "Please don't take her. Take everything else. Take me. Just don't take her. I can't." Sophie's cough from the back seat cut through my breakdown. It was worse. That terrible wet rattling sound of a small body fighting for air. I was going to do it. I was going to drive to my parents' house in Laurelhurst. I was going to ram through their decorative iron gates if I had to. I would drag myself up their perfect brick steps, and I would beg I would get on my hands and knees if that's what it took. I would give them the satisfaction of watching me grovel if it meant Sophie got help. I put the car in gear, my vision blurred by tears and rage and desperation. That's when the headlights appeared. They were bright, impossibly bright, cutting through the rain and darkness like searchlights. A car was pulling into the parking lot, moving slowly, deliberately. Not a security vehicle. Something else. Something expensive. The car was a midnight blue Mercedes, pristine and quiet. It pulled up directly beside my beat-up Honda and stopped. The passenger window descended smoothly. A woman sat in the driver's seat. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a professional bun, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than the Honda's remaining value. But her eyes were kind. She didn't shout over the rain. She just looked at me, at my tear-stained face, at Sophie shivering in the back seat, and said in a voice that somehow carried perfectly through the storm, "Ms. Victoria Hayes?" I froze. How did she know my name? "Who are you?" I managed to say. "My name is Elena Rodriguez," the woman said. "I'm the executive assistant to Mr. James Thorne. 12 years ago, you saved his life. He's been looking for you ever since. And now he's dying, and he says he owes you everything. We need to talk." I sat there in the driver's seat, rain hammering the roof, staring at this stranger who knew my name, and I couldn't process the words she'd just said. James Thorne. The name meant nothing to me. Saved his life. I'd never saved anyone's life. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. I don't know anyone named James Thorne. I've never— Route 90, eastbound. Elena Rodriguez interrupted, her voice calm and precise. 12 years ago, August 15th. Late at night during a thunderstorm, a black Lexus lost control and went off the road into the ravine near Snoqualmie Pass. You were driving home from a coding conference. You were the only other car on that stretch of highway. The memory hit me like cold water 12 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of grad school, working my first real job at a software company. I'd been at a weekend conference in Spokane, driving back to Seattle late because I wanted to beat the Sunday traffic. The storm came out of nowhere, turning the mountain highway into a black river. I'd been going slowly, carefully, when I saw the taillights ahead of me swerve violently. The car, a sedan, dark-colored, spun out and crashed through the guardrail. I saw it disappear over the edge, and I didn't think. I just stopped. I'd grabbed my phone and a flashlight from my glove box and climbed down that muddy slope in the rain. The car was on its side, wedged against a tree. Smoke was coming from the engine. I could smell gasoline. There was a man inside, unconscious, blood on his face. The driver's door was jammed. I remember screaming at him through the broken window, trying to wake him up. The smoke was getting thicker. I'd used a rock to break more of the window, and somehow, fueled by pure adrenaline and terror, I'd managed to unbuckle him and drag him out. I'd pulled him maybe 20 feet from the car when it caught fire. Not an explosion like in movies, just a sudden rush of flame that engulfed the entire vehicle in seconds. I'd called 911, given them the location, waited until I heard sirens in the distance. The man was breathing. He had a pulse. I'd done what I could. I was soaking wet, covered in mud and his blood, and I had a presentation at work Monday morning that I needed to prepare for. So I'd climbed back up to the highway, gotten in my car, and driven home. I'd never given my name. I'd never followed up. It was just something that happened. "That was you," I whispered, staring at Elena. "That man was James Thorne." "That man," Elena said, "was and is one of the most successful transportation logistics entrepreneurs in the country. Thorne Dynamics. Autonomous freight systems, supply chain optimization, last-mile delivery networks. He built it from nothing. And 12 years ago, someone tried to kill him by cutting his brake lines on that mountain road." Sophie coughed again in the back seat, a terrible rattling sound that brought me crashing back to the present. None of this mattered. A stranger's gratitude from 12 years ago didn't matter. My daughter was sick right now. "I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, but I really need to—" "Your daughter needs a doctor," Elena said, cutting me off. She wasn't guessing. She was stating a fact. "The hospital just turned you away because you couldn't pay. You're living in this car. You're desperate and alone and out of options. Am I wrong?" I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head. Elena's expression softened. "Mr. Thorne has been searching for the woman who saved him for 12 years. When your name appeared in the news because of the lawsuit, when your company collapsed, his investigative team flagged it. He's been monitoring this situation. He knows what happened to you wasn't your fault. He knows you were framed. And when he learned you were here, tonight, at this hospital with a sick child and nowhere to go, he sent me to find you." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Because Mr. Thorne is dying of pancreatic cancer. He has maybe 2 weeks left, possibly less. And because he believes in debts. You gave him 12 extra years of life. He wants to give you a chance at yours back." Elena paused, glancing at Sophie. "But first, your daughter needs immediate medical care. Mr. Thorne's estate includes a private medical facility, full staff, equipment, everything. No payment required. If you follow me now, we can have a pediatric specialist examining her within 30 minutes. Every instinct I had screamed that this was impossible. This was a trick, a scam, someone trying to exploit my desperation. Strangers in expensive cars didn't show up in hospital parking lots, offering miracles to homeless women. But Sophie coughed again, and I heard that crackling in her lungs, and I looked at Elena Rodriguez's face, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Genuine human concern. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Okay, we'll follow you." Elena nodded, already raising her window. "Stay close. The estate is north of the city, about 40 minutes. If you lose sight of me, call this number." She handed a business card through the window before it closed completely. The Mercedes pulled away smoothly, its taillights cutting red lines through the rain. I started the Honda, the engine coughing almost as badly as Sophie before catching, and followed. We drove north through the storm, leaving Seattle's lights behind. The highway turned into smaller roads, winding through dense forest. My gas light had been on for 2 days. The needle was buried on E. I was navigating on fumes and prayer. The Mercedes never went too fast, never lost me. Elena was deliberately keeping a pace I could follow. After what felt like hours but was probably closer to 45 minutes, the Mercedes turned onto an unmarked private road. The pavement changed from public asphalt to smooth private stone. We wound upward through towering pines, fog wrapping around everything like we were climbing into another world. Then the gates appeared. They were tall, modern, made of dark metal and glass set into natural stone pillars. They opened silently as we approached. No guardhouse, no intercom, just smooth automatic recognition. We drove through. The driveway curved through perfectly maintained grounds. Even in the rain and darkness, I could see the care. Native plants, subtle lighting, everything designed to blend with the forest rather than dominate it. And then the house appeared. It wasn't a house. It was an architectural statement. All clean lines and enormous windows, dark wood and steel and glass, built into the hillside so it seemed to grow from the landscape itself. Warm light glowed from within. It looked like something from a magazine, the kind of place I used to dream about before I learned that dreams had prices I couldn't afford. The Mercedes pulled under a covered entrance area. I stopped the Honda behind it, engine shuddering before finally dying. Elena was already out of her car, and there were others. A man in dark clothes who moved like private security, and another man, older, wearing medical scrubs. "This is Dr. Chen," Elena said as I fumbled to open my door. "He specializes in pediatric emergency medicine. Let him take her." I opened the back door. Sophie was barely conscious now, her face flushed, her breathing shallow. Dr. Chen moved with calm efficiency, lifting her carefully from the seat. "Hello, Sophie," he said softly. "I'm a doctor, and I'm going to help you feel better. Is that okay?" Sophie managed the tiniest nod. "Respiratory distress, high fever, probable pneumonia," I said, following as he carried her toward the house. My medical terminology came back automatically. "She's been sick for 2 days. The ER couldn't admit her. Oxygen saturation was 88. "Then we need to move quickly, Doctor," Chen said, not breaking stride. "This way." We entered through a side door, not the main entrance. The interior was as stunning as the exterior. Warm wood floors, high ceilings. But we weren't going to living spaces. Dr. Chen led us down a hallway to a set of doors marked only with a small medical symbol. The doors opened into a fully equipped medical suite. It was a small private hospital. Patient beds, monitoring equipment, oxygen systems, medication cabinets, everything. A nurse was already there, an older woman with efficient hands and a kind face. "Get her on oxygen immediately," Dr. Chen instructed, placing Sophie on the bed. "Start an IV line. I want full vitals and a chest X-ray." I stood there, dripping rainwater on the clean floor, watching them work. The nurse placed an oxygen mask gently over Sophie's face. Dr. Chen examined her with practiced precision. Numbers appeared on monitors. The oxygen saturation number, that terrifying 88, slowly began to climb. 89, 90, 92. Bacterial pneumonia, Dr. Chen confirmed after listening to her lungs. "We'll start broad-spectrum IV antibiotics now. She'll need to stay here for at least 3 days, possibly longer, but she's going to be fine. You got her here in time." The relief was so powerful I had to grab the wall to stay upright. "Ms. Hayes," Elena's voice said from behind me, "while Dr. Chen works, there's someone who would like to see you, if you're willing." I looked at Sophie. She was already breathing easier, the terrible rattling in her chest quieting as the oxygen did its work. The nurse caught my eye and smiled. "We'll take excellent care of her. I promise." I followed Elena back out of the medical wing and through the house. Now I could see it properly. The soaring windows that probably had incredible views in daylight, the carefully chosen art on the walls, the sense of space and calm that money and taste could create. We stopped at a set of double doors. Elena knocked softly before opening them. The room inside was large, but had been converted into something between a bedroom and a hospital room. There was a hospital bed, monitoring equipment, IV stands. But there were also bookshelves, a massive stone fireplace, windows looking out into the dark forest. It was designed for someone to live in, not just survive in, and in the bed was James Thorne. He looked nothing like the man I'd pulled from that car 12 years ago. That man had been unconscious, bleeding, but substantial. This man was a skeleton. Cancer had consumed him, leaving behind a fragile shell. His skin was gray, his cheeks hollow. But his eyes? His eyes were alert, intelligent, and fixed on me as I entered. A younger nurse stood by his bedside, adjusting something on one of the monitors. She nodded to Elena and quietly left the room. "Ms. Hayes." James Thorne's voice was barely a whisper, a dry rasp that seemed to take all his strength. "Thank you for coming." I walked closer to the bed, still in my damp clothes, still shaking slightly from adrenaline and relief. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know what to say." "What you've done for Sophie, getting her treatment, it's what anyone should have done." He interrupted, each word clearly costing him effort. "But our country's healthcare system makes compassion optional for those who can't pay. I'm simply correcting that cruelty." He gestured weakly toward a chair beside the bed I sat. "I have," he continued slowly, "spent 12 years and considerable resources trying to find the woman in the gray raincoat who pulled me from that fire. The woman who didn't leave her name, didn't ask for reward, just did what was right because it was right." "I was just the only person there," I said. "Anyone would have—" "No." His voice gained strength, a flash of the man he must have been before the disease. "No, most people would have called 911 and waited safely up on the road. You climbed down in a storm. You physically pulled me out before that car exploded. You saved my life when you had no obligation to do so." He paused, breathing carefully, and his eyes studied my face. Elena has told me what happened to you. Your company, the lawsuit, the framing, your family abandoning you. I want you to understand something, Victoria. I built Thorn Dynamics from nothing. I understand what it means to create something meaningful. And I also understand what it means to be targeted by people who want to destroy what you've built. Someone tried to kill you, I said, remembering what Elena had mentioned in the parking lot. They cut your brakes. Yes. A bitter smile crossed his face. I had enemies, competitors who wanted my patents, my contracts, my market position. After the crash, I hired investigators. We spent years tracking the money trail. We found evidence of conspiracy, corporate sabotage, paid assassins, but we never found enough proof to prosecute. The people responsible were too well protected, too well funded. He looked at me intently. When I saw what happened to your company, Victoria, I recognized the pattern, the fabricated evidence, the planted documents, the surgical destruction of your reputation. It was too familiar, too precise. Someone with resources and sophistication wanted you eliminated. Titan Guard Systems, I said. They're the ones who sued me. They're the weapon, James said. But I don't believe they're the hand holding it. Elena, the file. Elena, who had been standing quietly by the door, approached with a thin folder. She handed it to James, who rested it on his chest, too weak to hold it up. I had my team investigate, he said. We're good at following money, at finding patterns. Titan Guard Systems is owned by a parent company called Redstone Holdings. Redstone is a private equity firm that specializes in hostile acquisitions of technology companies. They identify targets, destroy them through legal action or sabotage, then acquire the assets for pennies on the dollar. My blood went cold. They wanted Nextrust. They wanted your patents, your client list, and your reputation destroyed so completely that no one would question the acquisition. They needed you specifically to be the villain, so the company itself could be the victim they swooped in to save. But why me specifically? I asked. There are dozens of cybersecurity firms. Because you were the ethical one, James said simply. You were the one who said no to government backdoors, who refused to compromise, that made you valuable. Your principles gave your company credibility that others didn't have. But it also made you vulnerable. People who stand on principles can be destroyed by appearing to betray those principles. They turned your greatest strength into your greatest weakness. I thought about all those fabricated emails, those fake wire transfers, the perfect forgeries that made me look like everything I'd fought against. Someone had studied me, understood me, and used that understanding to destroy me. I'm telling you this, James continued, his voice getting weaker, because I'm dying, Victoria. I have maybe 2 weeks, and I've spent the last weeks of my life making arrangements. I can't give you back what was taken, but I can give you something else: resources, protection, a chance to rebuild. If you want it. I don't understand, I whispered. Tomorrow my attorney will contact you. You'll be asked to attend a reading of my will. I'm asking you now, before that happens, to understand why I'm doing this. He paused, breathing carefully. I never married. I have no children. I built an empire, but I built it alone. The person who saved my life asked for nothing, expected nothing. That person deserves something. Mr. Thorne, let me finish, please. He closed his eyes briefly. You made a choice on that highway. You chose to help a stranger at risk to yourself. You asked nothing in return. Everything that came after, your company, your success, your ethics, All of it proved that you were exactly who I thought you were that night. Someone who does what's right even when it costs you everything. That's rare. That's worth protecting." He looked at me, and despite his frailty, his gaze was sharp. "Sleep here tonight. Stay with your daughter. Rest. Eat. Tomorrow we'll talk more. But know this. You saved my life. I don't consider that debt paid. I consider it a responsibility." I wanted to say something, but words seemed inadequate. This dying stranger was offering me hope after months of having none. It felt surreal, impossible, like something that would evaporate if I examined it too closely. "Thank you," I finally managed. "For Sophie. For everything, thank Elena," he said with a tired smile. "She's the one who found you. She's the one who's been managing my increasingly elaborate deathbed wishes." He closed his eyes. "I need to rest now. Elena will show you to a room. We'll talk tomorrow." Elena touched my shoulder gently, guiding me toward the door. I looked back once James Thorne looked even smaller in that big bed, a dying man trying to fix something before he left the world behind. Elena led me back through the house to the medical wing. First, Sophie was sleeping peacefully now, the oxygen mask still on her face but her color better, her breathing steady. Dr. Chen was reviewing charts. "She's responding well," he said when he saw me. "Fever's already down 2 degrees. We'll keep her on IV fluids and antibiotics overnight. You should rest, Ms. Hayes. You look exhausted." Elena guided me to a guest room that was larger than any apartment I'd ever had. There was a king bed with soft linens, a private bathroom, windows that showed only darkness and rain outside. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit you," Elena said. "The shower has plenty of hot water. Kitchen is always open if you're hungry. Your daughter is in excellent hands. Try to sleep." She left, closing the door quietly behind her. I stood in the middle of that beautiful room, still wearing my damp clothes, and I didn't know what to do. For the first time in months, I was warm, safe. My daughter was being cared for by actual doctors, and I was so overwhelmed by the sudden absence of terror that I didn't know how to exist without it. I showered, letting hot water wash away months of parking lot sink baths and fear. I found clothes in the closet like Elena had said. Soft pants, a sweater, everything my size as if prepared specifically for me. I lay down on the bed, on sheets that smelled clean and felt expensive, and I stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would process this. Tomorrow I would figure out what James Thorne meant by arrangements and resources. Tomorrow I would deal with whatever complications came with accepting help from a dying billionaire tonight. I just let myself feel safe. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of panic before remembering where I was. The bedside clock said 9 in the morning. I hadn't slept past 7 in months. I jumped up and ran to the medical wing. Sophie was awake, sitting up in bed, eating scrambled eggs from a tray while a different nurse, a younger woman with a bright smile, changed her IV bag. "Mama!" Sophie's face lit up when she saw me. "They have a TV and I watched cartoons, and the eggs are really good and I feel so much better." The relief was physical. The terrible flush was gone from her cheeks. Her eyes were clear. She looked like my daughter again instead of a frighteningly sick shadow. "How is she?" I asked the nurse. "Fever's down to 99.1. Oxygen saturation has been steady at 97 all night. Dr. Chen wants to keep her on IV antibiotics for another 48 hours minimum, but she's doing great. Kids bounce back fast." I spent the morning with Sophie, reading to her from books the nurse brought, watching children's shows, just being present with my healthy child. Around noon, Elena appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Thorne is awake and asking for you. If you have a few minutes." I kissed Sophie's forehead. "I'll be right back, sweetie. You keep coloring that picture for me." I followed Elena back to James's room. He looked worse in daylight, the gray pallor more pronounced, but his eyes were alert. "Victoria," he said, his voice slightly stronger than last night. "Thank you for coming. How is Sophie?" "She's so much better. Thank you, your doctor, your staff. I can never repay." He raised one skeletal hand to stop me. "You already did. 12 years ago. Now, I need to explain something before my attorney arrives this afternoon. I need you to understand what I'm offering and why." I sat in the same chair as last night. "Thorne Dynamics," he began slowly, "is worth approximately $3.2 billion. It's a leader in autonomous logistics, with contracts throughout North America and expanding globally. I've built it carefully, ethically where possible, ruthlessly when necessary. I'm not a saint, Victoria. I've made hard decisions. But I've also tried to build something that matters, something that pushes technology forward while treating workers fairly." He paused, breathing carefully. "I have a nephew, Derek. My late sister's son. He's 38, works in finance, and he's been very interested in his inheritance for the past 5 years. Derek believes Thorne Dynamics should be his by right of blood. The problem is that Derek is exactly the wrong person to run this company. He sees it as an asset to be stripped and sold, not a living business. If he inherits, he'll dismantle everything within 2 years. So you're leaving it to someone else," I said. "I'm leaving the controlling interest to someone who understands what it means to build something meaningful. Someone who's been tested and didn't break. Someone who did the right thing when it cost them everything." He looked at me. "I'm leaving it to you." The words didn't make sense, I heard them, but they didn't connect to anything rational. "Mr. Thorne, I can't. I'm not qualified to run a multi-billion-dollar logistics company. I built a small cybersecurity firm. I have no experience in—" "You built a company from nothing based on principles," he interrupted. "You understand technology, you understand ethics, and you understand what it means to lose everything. Those are the qualifications that matter. Everything else can be taught. Your nephew will fight this," I said. "He'll claim you were manipulated, that you weren't competent. Yes, he will, which is why I've prepared. I had my attorney and my physician videotape a full testimony 3 days ago. I'm of sound mind, Victoria. Dying, yes, but mentally sharp. Derek can contest all he wants, but he'll lose. The will is ironclad." I stood up, pacing to the window, trying to process yesterday I was sleeping in a car. Today a dying billionaire was trying to give me an empire. "Why me?" I asked, turning back to face him. "Really, there must be executives, people you've worked with for years, people who actually know the business. Because everyone else wants something from me," James said simply. "They want the company for themselves, for the power, for the wealth. You didn't even remember saving my life. You ask for nothing. That's why it has to be you." Before I could respond, Elena appeared in the doorway. "Sir, your attorney is here." "Send him in," James said. Then to me, "Last chance to run, Victoria. Once you hear this, once the will is read, your life changes. Derek will come after you. The media will tear you apart. Everyone will have an opinion about the homeless woman who inherited billions. It won't be easy." I thought about Sophie in the next wing, healthy and safe because this man had helped us. I thought about my company, destroyed by people who could fabricate reality itself. I thought about sleeping in a car and being turned away from a hospital and having my own parents hand me $500 like I was a beggar on their doorstep. "I'm not running," I said. The attorney, a gray-haired man named Robert Morrison, spent the next hour walking me through the basics. The will left $50 million and 2 properties to Derek Thorne to provide for his future without giving him power to destroy mine, as James phrased it. Staff members, including Elena, received generous bequests. The controlling 65% stake in Thorne Dynamics, the estate, and the remainder of James's personal assets went to me. The numbers on the papers Robert showed me had so many zeros they didn't seem real. "This will take effect upon Mr. Thorne's death," Robert explained. "There will be a transition period, obviously, but arrangements have been made for you to have full legal and financial support during that time. Mr. Thorne has also established a trust to cover all legal costs related to your ongoing lawsuit from Titan Guard Systems. We have investigators ready to examine that case more closely." After Robert left, James was visibly exhausted. "I need to rest now," he said. "But Victoria, there's one more thing. In my desk, top drawer, there's an envelope. It's sealed. Take it now, but don't open it until after I'm gone. It contains information about my crash 12 years ago, about who was responsible. I never got justice, but maybe you can. Consider it my final gift. The truth." Elena brought me the envelope. It was heavy, the same expensive paper stock, sealed with actual wax like something from another century. I held it carefully, feeling its weight. "Thank you," I said to James, "for everything, for Sophie, for believing in me, for—" "Don't thank me yet," he said with a tired smile. "You don't know what you're inheriting. The company has enemies, powerful ones. They'll test you, but I believe you can handle it. You've already survived what should have destroyed you." He died 4 days later. It was early morning, just after dawn. Elena came to get me. "It's time," she said quietly. I'd been expecting it, but it still hit hard. I went to his room. He looked peaceful, finally released from pain. Dr. Chen was there, officially noting the time. Elena stood by the window, tears on her cheeks that she didn't bother to hide. "He liked you," she told me later that day. "In all the years I worked for him, I never saw him trust someone so quickly. He said you had honest eyes." The funeral was small, held in a private section of the estate's grounds overlooking a valley. There were maybe 15 people, staff, his attorney, a handful of business associates. No family except Derek, who stood apart from everyone, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He approached me after the service as people were leaving. He was tall, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if it wasn't twisted with rage. "You think you're clever," he said quietly, viciously. "You think you can manipulate a dying man and steal what's rightfully mine. But I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to prove you coerced him, manipulated him, took advantage of his illness. You're nobody. You're a failed CEO with a fraud conviction. Who's going to believe you deserved this?" I looked at him steadily. 3 months ago, his words would have made me crumble. Now they just made me tired. "Your uncle knew exactly what he was doing," I said. "He was the smartest person I ever met, even at the end. He didn't choose me despite my past. He chose me because of it, because I understand what it means to lose everything and still choose to do the right thing. That's something you'll never understand." His face went white with rage. "We'll see what a judge says. I'm contesting this will. You're going to regret ever meeting my uncle." He turned and walked away, pulling out his phone before he'd even reached his car. Elena stood beside me, watching him go. "He'll file within 24 hours, she predicted. "He has lawyers on retainer who specialize in will contests." "Let him," I said. The words surprised me with their strength. "I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to apologize for it either. James wanted me to have it. I'm going to honor that." That night, alone in what was now legally my house, I opened the sealed envelope James had left me. Inside were several documents. The first was a letter in James's handwriting. "Victoria, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope my death was peaceful. I hope you were kind enough to stay until the end. That would be like you. What I'm giving you now is a burden. I debated keeping this secret, taking it to my grave, but I believe in justice, even delayed justice, and I believe you deserve the truth about what you walked into. 12 years ago, someone tried to kill me by cutting the brake lines on my car. My investigators traced the conspiracy back to a corporate sabotage network. The money flowed through shell companies, offshore accounts, layers of deniability, but we finally found the source. The attempt on my life was orchestrated by a private equity firm called Redstone Holdings. They wanted to acquire Thorne Dynamics through hostile takeover, and I refused to sell, so they decided to remove the obstacle. Redstone Holdings is the same firm that orchestrated the destruction of your company, Next Trust. They used Titan Guard systems as their weapon against you the same way they used sabotage against me. The pattern is identical. Attached, you will find copies of financial documents, communications, and investigative reports proving Redstone's involvement in my attempted murder. I never went to the authorities because I couldn't definitively prove who ordered it, only who paid for it. The trail ends at Redstone's CEO, a man named Marcus Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, but the legal protections around him are formidable. I'm giving this to you not as a demand for revenge, but as information. What you do with it is your choice. But know this, the same people who tried to kill me are the same people who destroyed your life. They're predators, and they're still out there. Choose wisely, Victoria. Justice has a cost, but so does silence. James. My hands were shaking as I read through the attached documents, bank records showing wire transfers from Redstone Holdings to an offshore security consulting firm, email communications discussing the Thorne problem and permanent solutions, investigative reports linking the mechanic who sabotaged James's car to payments from that consulting firm. And there, at the bottom of the paper trail, was the signature on the authorization. Marcus Chen, CEO of Redstone Holdings. The same Redstone Holdings that owned Titan Guard systems. The same company that had destroyed my life. I spent the next 3 days holed up with James's investigators and my new legal team. Because apparently I now had a legal team, a whole firm on retainer. We went through everything. The evidence against Redstone, the fabricated case against Next Trust, the patterns of corporate sabotage. We can prove Redstone owns Titan Guard, my lead attorney, Catherine Wu, explained. We can prove they have a history of acquiring companies through aggressive legal action. What's harder to prove is that they deliberately framed you. The evidence they used against you was sophisticated. Someone with serious resources and technical capability created those forgeries. But if we can prove they did it to James, attempted murder, corporate sabotage, doesn't that establish a pattern? It helps, Catherine said carefully. But James's case was never prosecuted. The evidence exists, but it was never tested in court. Using it now to support your case means essentially opening 2 cases simultaneously, a criminal case against Redstone for attempted murder and a civil case against Titangard for fraudulent lawsuit and defamation. So we do both, I said. Catherine looked at me seriously. Victoria, that's declaring war. Redstone has resources, connections, lawyers who make my team look like public defenders. They'll come at you with everything. Your past, your current situation, the fact that you just inherited billions from a man you barely knew. They'll make you look like a con artist, a gold digger, a manipulator. The media will be brutal. I thought about Sophie, healthy now and playing in the estate's garden with a nurse watching over her. I thought about James, who'd given me a second chance. I thought about sleeping in that car, about being turned away from the hospital, about my own parents treating me like garbage. Let them come, I said. I'm done running. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The announcement that I was the primary beneficiary of James Thorne's estate hit the news like a bomb. Within hours, my face was on every major outlet. The narrative was predictable and vicious. From homeless to heiress, the suspicious inheritance. Failed CEO lands billions after meeting dying billionaire. Thorne family contests will, claims manipulation. Derek Thorne was everywhere, doing interviews, looking appropriately grieved and outraged. My uncle was a brilliant man, but cancer and pain medication affected his judgment, he told one reporter, his voice heavy with false sorrow. This woman appeared out of nowhere in his final days and somehow convinced him to disinherit his own family. It's textbook elder abuse. The press camped outside the estate gates. I couldn't take Sophie to the park without cameras following us. Every detail of my past was excavated and displayed. The next trust failure, the lawsuit, the months in the car, my parents' rejection. Some outlets were sympathetic, Cinderella story angles about a woman rising from nothing. Most were suspicious, gold digger narratives about manipulation and deceit. I ignored it all and focused on the work. Catherine Wu assembled a legal strike team. We filed a motion to dismiss the original Titangard lawsuit on grounds of fraud and fabricated evidence simultaneously. We filed a separate lawsuit against Titangard and Redstone Holdings for conspiracy, defamation, and tortious interference with business. And we went to the district attorney with James's evidence about the attempted murder. The DA, a sharp woman named Lisa Park, reviewed the materials carefully. "This is substantial," she said after a week of investigation. "If even half of this holds up, we're looking at conspiracy to commit murder, corporate sabotage, possibly RICO charges. But I need to warn you, Miss Hayes. The moment we move on this, Redstone will know who provided the evidence. They'll retaliate." "I know," I said. "Do it anyway." The arrests happened on a Thursday morning. FBI agents, coordinated with the DA's office, executed warrants at Redstone Holdings' Seattle office and at Marcus Chen's home in Bellevue. The charges were severe: conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, corporate sabotage. Marcus Chen was walked out of his office in handcuffs while news cameras rolled his expensive suit, his shocked expression, his stammered no comment to the reporters. All of it was captured and broadcast nationally. Redstone's stock price plummeted, and then, as Catherine had predicted, they came after me. Redstone's defense team was ferocious. They held press conferences claiming the charges were revenge by a disgruntled business rival, meaning me. They implied I'd fabricated evidence, that James had been senile, that I'd manipulated a dying man into creating false documents to support my vendetta. Ms. Hayes was facing financial ruin. One of their attorneys told reporters outside the courthouse. She latched on to Mr. Thorne in his final days and convinced him to not only leave her his fortune, but to also create elaborate conspiracy theories about my clients. This is a woman with a proven history of corporate deception, now trying to destroy a legitimate business to cover her own crimes. Derek Thorne joined forces with them. Naturally, his will contest and their criminal defense became intertwined. They painted a picture. I was a master manipulator who'd found a vulnerable, dying billionaire, convinced him I'd saved his life years ago, manufactured evidence of a corporate conspiracy, and manipulated him into leaving me everything. The probate hearing for James's will became a media circus. The courtroom was packed with reporters. Derek's legal team was expensive and theatrical. They brought in medical experts to testify about how pain medication and cancer could affect judgment. They brought in a psychologist who'd never met James, but was happy to speculate about his vulnerable mental state. Our side countered with James's video testimony, recorded 3 days before he signed the final will. The courtroom went silent as James's image appeared on the screen, frail but fierce. I'm making this recording because I know my nephew Derek will contest my will. He'll claim I was manipulated, that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I was vulnerable. So let me be absolutely clear. I am dying, yes. I am in pain, yes. But my mind is sharp and my intentions are crystal clear. I am leaving my company to Victoria Hayes because she is the only person I've met in 40 years of business who did something for me expecting absolutely nothing in return. She saved my life 12 years ago and disappeared. She built a company based on principles, not profit, and was destroyed for it. She was tested in ways most people never face, and she didn't break Derek. If you're watching this, you are my nephew, and I've provided for you generously. $50 million is more than most people see in 10 lifetimes, but you will not get my company because you would destroy it within 2 years. You see it as money to be extracted, not as something meaningful to be built and protected. Victoria, if you're watching this, I'm sorry for this burden. I'm sorry for the attacks that are coming, but I believe you can handle it. You've already survived what should have destroyed you. The company needs someone who understands that someone who won't compromise what matters just because it's difficult. This is my will. This is my choice. And anyone who claims otherwise is either lying or a fool. The judge, an older man with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, watched the entire video without expression. When it ended, he looked at Derek's attorney. Counsel, your client claims his uncle was not of sound mind. I've just watched a video of a man who articulated his reasoning with perfect clarity. Do you have any actual evidence of incompetence or just speculation? Derek's attorney floundered. Your Honor, the circumstances are highly suspicious. Suspicious is not a legal standard, the judge interrupted. Mr. Thorne's medical records show no cognitive impairment. His physicians have testified he was lucid. He made a video explaining his exact reasoning. Unless you have concrete evidence of coercion or incompetence, this contest is without merit. The judge ruled in my favor 2 weeks later. The will stood. I was officially the primary beneficiary and controlling shareholder of Thorne Dynamics. Derek Thorne stood outside the courthouse afterward, surrounded by cameras, his face contorted with rage. This isn't over, he told reporters. We'll appeal. We'll expose her for the fraud she is. Justice will be served. But his moment in the spotlight was ending, because the criminal trial against Redstone Holdings was beginning, and that's where everyone's attention shifted. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They showed the money trail: wire transfers from Redstone to offshore accounts, payments to the security consultant who'd sabotaged James's car, communications discussing removing obstacles and permanent solutions. They brought in the mechanic who'd cut the brake lines he'd been found living in Mexico under an assumed name. In exchange for immunity, he testified about being hired by an intermediary to sabotage a specific vehicle. He identified photos of James's car. They brought in forensic accountants who traced every dollar from Redstone through the shell companies to the mechanic's payment. Marcus Chen's defense was that he'd been unaware, that rogue elements in his company had acted without his knowledge. But the paper trail told a different story. His signature was on key financial documents. His emails discussed the Thorn situation and eliminating competition. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the same back corner of the public gallery where no one noticed me. I watched Marcus Chen, the man who'd ordered someone to kill James, who'd orchestrated the destruction of my company, slowly realize he was going to prison. The verdict came after 6 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, corporate sabotage, racketeering. Marcus Chen's face went gray as the verdict was read. His expensive lawyers immediately began talking about appeals, but it didn't matter. He was going to prison for 25 years minimum. Redstone Holdings collapsed within a month. Without Marcus Chen, without credibility, the company imploded. Assets were seized, subsidiaries sold off to cover legal costs and settlements, including Titan Guard systems, which meant the lawsuit against me, the fabricated case that had destroyed Next Trust, was suddenly without a plaintiff. Titan Guard no longer existed as an entity. The case was formally dismissed with prejudice. My legal team immediately filed a countersuit against the liquidated assets of both companies for damages. The settlement, negotiated over 8 months, was substantial enough to fully restore what I'd lost, and then some. But more importantly, the truth came out. Independent investigators, hired with Thorn Dynamics resources, forensically proved that the evidence used against me had been fabricated. The emails were planted using sophisticated spoofing techniques. The server logs were falsified. The digital signatures were perfect forgeries created by experts. Every major outlet that had called me a fraud ran corrections. My name was cleared. It didn't fix everything. It didn't give me back the months in the car, the trauma Sophie experienced, the relationship with my parents that had died, but it gave me something I'd been fighting for since the beginning: the truth. 6 months after Marcus Chen's conviction, after the dust settled and Thorn Dynamics stock had stabilized under new management, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I drove to my parents' house in Laurelhurst. The iron gates, the brick facade, the perfect landscaping, it all looked the same, untouchable. Pristine. The house of people for whom reputation mattered more than their own daughter. I didn't call ahead. I parked in the circular driveway, walked up the steps, and rang the bell. My father answered. He looked older than I remembered, grayer. His expression when he saw me was complicated. Surprise, wariness, something that might have been shame if he was capable of it. "Victoria," he said, not a greeting, just an acknowledgement. "Hello, Father. May I come in?" He stepped aside. My mother was in the sitting room, the same room where she'd told me not to contact them again. She stood when she saw me, her practiced composure firmly in place. "Victoria, we've been following the news," she began. "We're pleased that your name has been cleared. We always believed—" "No, you didn't," I interrupted quietly. "You didn't believe in me. You told me I was an embarrassment. You gave me $500 like I was a beggar and told me not to come back until the mess was resolved." My mother's face tightened. "We were protecting the family's reputation. Surely you can understand—" "I understand perfectly," I said. "You valued your reputation more than your daughter or your granddaughter. That's fine. That's your choice. But I want you to understand mine." I placed an envelope on their coffee table. It was thick, official-looking. "That's a check for $500, I said. "Payment in full for the loan you gave me, plus interest. Consider it returned with my gratitude for teaching me exactly who you are." My father picked up the envelope, opened it, saw the check. His face went pale as he read the amount. $500 from Victoria Hayes, CEO of Thorne Dynamics. "We didn't mean for things to go the way they did," he said, his voice strained. "We were trying to protect yourselves," I finished. "You were protecting yourselves, not me, not Sophie, and that's fine. I don't need your protection anymore. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I came here to tell you that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because carrying anger toward you was weighing me down." My mother's composure finally cracked. "Victoria, we're your parents. We love you." "No," I said, the word final. Parents love their children even when it's inconvenient, even when it damages their reputation, even when it costs them something. What you felt toward me was conditional, transactional, and I'm done accepting that as love. I turned toward the door, then paused. "Sophie asks about you sometimes, about her grandparents. I tell her you live far away and can't visit. That's kinder than the truth. But I want you to know, you missed out. You missed watching an incredible little girl grow up because you were more concerned with what your country club friends might think." I walked out. The heavy oak door closed behind me with the same final sound it had made the last time I'd left, when Sophie had said goodbye to grandparents who wouldn't respond. But this time, I was walking toward something instead of away from everything. 2 years later, I stood in the main auditorium at Thorne Dynamics headquarters, looking out at 300 employees gathered for the annual company meeting. Sophie, now 9, sat in the front row with Elena, who'd become not just an assistant, but a friend, a mentor. And the closest thing to family we had, I'd spent those 2 years learning the business, making mistakes, fixing them, and slowly earning the trust of people who'd initially seen me as an outsider. I'd restructured the company to focus on ethical automation, technology that replaced dangerous jobs while retraining workers for safer positions. I'd increased wages and profit sharing. I'd turned down contracts that required compromising our values. The company was thriving, not just financially, but as a place where people wanted to work, where innovation happened without exploitation. 2 years ago, I told the crowd, I inherited this company from a man who believed in second chances. James Thorne saw potential in someone who'd lost everything and was living in a car with her daughter. He gave me an opportunity I never asked for and certainly didn't expect. I'm not going to pretend I'm the same person James was. I'm not. I've made different decisions, taken different risks. Some of you disagreed with those choices. That's fine. But what I've tried to do is honor the principle behind his choice. The belief that who you are matters more than where you come from. This company isn't about me. It's about all of us building something that matters. Technology that helps people instead of replacing them. Profits that are shared, Not hoarded ethics that aren't just slogans on the website, but actual operating principles we follow even when they're expensive or difficult. James told me once that I'd been tested by fire and didn't break. Well, we've all been tested these past 2 years. The lawsuits, the media scrutiny, the industry skepticism about whether someone like me could run a company like this, and we didn't break. We're stronger now than when I started. The applause was genuine, warm, not the polite corporate clapping I'd experienced in my first months, but real appreciation. After the meeting, Elena and I walked through the building's main plaza, a beautiful open space with natural light and trees growing indoors that James had designed. He'd be proud, Elena said, of what you've built. What you've become. I hope so, I said. Some days I still can't believe this is real, that I'm here instead of sleeping in a parking lot. But you are here, Elena said, because you survived. Because you made the right choices even when they cost you everything. That's why he chose you. That night, back at the estate that was now home, I tucked Sophie into her bed. She had her own room now, decorated exactly how she wanted. Purple walls, bookshelves full of stories, windows overlooking the forest. "Mama," she said as I turned out the light, "do you remember when we lived in the car?" My heart clenched. "I do, sweetie. Why?" "I was thinking about it today. I was scared sometimes, but I always felt safe because you were there. You made it feel like an adventure even though it wasn't. You were very brave," I said, smoothing her hair. "So were you," she said seriously. "And now we have this big house, and you have your big job and everything's different, but you're still the same mama who made me feel safe in the car." After she fell asleep, I went to James's old study, which I'd kept mostly as he'd left it. I opened the desk drawer where the envelope had been, the one with all the evidence about Redstone. I'd made the choice to pursue justice, to use what James had given me. It had cost me privacy, peace, months of legal battles and media scrutiny, but it had also given me truth, vindication, and the chance to stop the people who'd destroyed not just me, but James and countless others, justice and forgiveness. James had said they both had prices. I'd chosen justice, and I'd paid the price willingly, but forgiveness. For my parents, for the system that had failed Sophie when she was sick, for all the people who'd abandoned me when I needed them most. That had come later, quietly, not because anyone deserved it, but because I needed to let it go. I thought about the night in the hospital parking lot, desperate and broken, when Elena had appeared with an impossible offer. How one choice, one act of compassion from a stranger 12 years ago, had created a ripple that changed everything. I'd pulled James from that burning car because it was the right thing to do. He'd given me his company because I'd done it expecting nothing in return, and now I was trying to run that company the same way, doing what was right even when it was hard, helping people who needed it, building something meaningful instead of just profitable. The cycle of compassion, James had called it in one of our late-night conversations. One person does something good, and it ripples outward in ways you can't predict. I'd been saved by a stranger's gratitude. Now it was my turn to be the one who helped someone else, the one who looked for people who'd been tested and didn't break, the one who believed that who you are matters more than what you've lost. My name is Victoria Hayes. I'm 38 years old. I'm the CEO of Thorn Dynamics and the mother of an incredible daughter who teaches me every day what courage really looks like. I've been a tech CEO, a homeless woman, and a billionaire. I've been celebrated, destroyed, and rebuilt. I've learned that reputation is fragile, that family isn't always blood, and that integrity costs everything until it's the only thing you have left, and then it's priceless. This is my story. It's a story about losing everything, about the moment when you have to choose between survival and principles, about the cost of standing up when everyone else has walked away, but mostly, it's a story about how one act of compassion, one moment of doing the right thing when no one's watching, can ripple through time and change everything. James Thorne saved my life by giving me a second chance. But years before that, I'd saved his by simply being the person who stopped when someone needed help. We saved each other. And maybe that's what compassion really is. The recognition that we're all just people, that we all need help sometimes, and that choosing to be there for someone when you don't have to is the most powerful thing any of us can do. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here.